Hello, this is Moni Castaneda, and we are getting together today to talk about the 5 worst Feng Shui cures for dealing with bad neighbors. Now, if you've ever had a bad neighbor, you know that a bad neighbor can be a nightmare. A bad neighbor can ruin your experience of enjoying your home and many other problems. And I have been a Feng Shui consultant for over 20 years, and I have helped many clients resolve their problems with bad neighbors. Some of these problems were minor problems, like arguments, discussions. Other problems were more serious, and then they included lawyers, lawsuits, and even personal aggression. And so one of the reasons I wanted to do this class with you guys is because I had noticed that one of the most visited pages on my website is a page that I created where I teach people how to properly use a Bawa mirror. And I also explain why I do not use Bawa mirrors anymore. It's been over 8 years since I recommended any of my clients use a Bawa mirror. And we're going to talk about the reasons why today. And so one of the things that had happened, I created this page that is called how to use a Feng Shui Bagua mirror and what I use instead. And I had noticed that a lot of people were posting questions there in comments, asking about what to do about bad neighbors and telling me the stories of their problems with bad neighbors. Now, when I checked how people were arriving at the page, some people were searching for Bagua mirrors, but a lot of people were arriving at my page searching for Feng Shui to help with bad neighbors. And so that's one thing that was very interesting, right? That so many people were coming to my website looking for this information on how to deal with bad neighbors. And so today I'm going to be sharing with you a presentation, because when I was thinking, well, maybe I should do a teleclass on how to deal with bad neighbors. And so I went on the internet and I ran a search to see what other people are advising. And I found some very horrible advice, things that don't work at all. And so then I started thinking, there may be a lot of people who are actually using these really bad cures. And then they may be hurting their own luck. And these cures may backfire, and also they may be creating bad karma for themselves. So this is one of the things that I wanted to address with this free class that we're doing today, because it is no joke. Some of the cures that people are recommending are downright destructive, potentially destructive to your neighbor, to your bad neighbor, but also to you. And I wanted to touch upon this with you, and to make sure that you are not doing these things that may be creating bad luck for you. Now, in Feng Shui, we don't see luck as chance or random things, that happen. But luck is actually a consequence of the quality of your energy field, and a consequence of the quality of the energy in your home, the quality of qi in your home. So if your home has a lot of qi visiting, a lot of vitality, you tend to have better luck. And so some of the things that people are recommending that the folks do would lower the vitality of their own homes, and they would lower the energy of the person practicing these cures. So let me start sharing my presentation and we can get right to it. There you go. So the 5 worst Feng Shui cures for dealing with bad neighbors is what we're talking about today. And there's all sorts of problems that can come from dealing with bad neighbors, right? And bad neighbors can be very noisy. Bad neighbors can be causing you a lot of problems. They may be doing things to your property. They may be doing things on your property. They may be putting things in front of your property. There may be issues with cleanliness. There may be issues with the kind of people that visit them. They may be having parties. They may have pets that are causing trouble. So there's all sorts of problems that can arise from having bad neighbors. But the solution is not to seek no neighbors. The solution is never to say, hey, because this bothers me, I'm going to now try to look for a property in the country, in the boondocks, where I have no neighbors. And if we have time today, I would like to share with you about what has happened to some of my clients that before they consulted me, they actually sought the route of having no neighbors at all, and it was not a good idea. So you want to have good neighbors, and you want to have good relationships with your neighbors. Now, sometimes it seems impossible to have a good relationship with a neighbor because your neighbor is kind of out there or nuts, right? And so when you have a bad neighbor, that neighbor can ruin the enjoyment of your own home for yourself. They make you feel afraid to come home because you're afraid that you might encounter them, that you might cross their path, and there's going to be more arguments, more problems. When you have bad neighbors, this results in less time spent outside in your own yard, working on your yard, or enjoying your home, your yard, and doing less gardening, cleaning less. And so it can have adverse effects for your home. A bad neighbor causes you worries, and it may cause you losses. A bad neighbor may cause you to lose things. A friend was recently telling me this story about a neighbor who had asked if she would mind if they trimmed some branches of a tree that was in her property, but some of the branches were going over the fence into their property. And so she told them very clearly, I do not mind if you trim the branches that are going into your property, but I don't want you to touch the branches that are going that are in my property at all. And then the neighbor hired somebody who came in and pretty much pruned her whole tree. And she was so upset, right? So there may be losses that may be financial, physical, or emotional. Like in this case, she was very attached to the tree. The tree provided wonderful shade. The best spot for shade in her backyard was provided by this tree. So it was a great loss for her and her family. And bad neighbors can create legal problems for you or problems with the police. They can sue you for things, or they can call the police on you. And if you watch the videos, if you didn't watch the videos where I share the problems we have had with our neighbors, I recommend that you do go back to your emails, check your emails, and look for those videos so you can check the stories that I share with you. And so if you look at sorry about that. Let me make sure that we're still recording and still playing. And remember, if you are watching the live broadcast of this class, you can use the chat feature to communicate with me and to ask any questions or to ask for clarification. And so here's the problem. A lot of us, me included, when we face a problem, our first reaction is to say, hey, I'm going to go Google it, right? And so you go and Google whatever your problem is, like Feng Shui bad neighbors. And so I did that for you. And I went and looked at things because Feng Shui has great tools to deal with bad neighbors. But unfortunately, when I did that Google search, I found plenty of bad advice and things that were really, really horrendous. Very few common sense advice that would actually work or help. And I will share that with you today, the things that actually would help that you find out there on the internet. And I chose the examples of the 5 worst pieces of advice. So one of them was place a basin or a tub of water between your home and the home of your neighbor. Don't do this. Another advice was paint the outside of your home white. Don't do this either. Third one was using mirrors, including a bagua mirror. Some people said use a bagua mirror above your door. Other people said use a bagua mirror on the side facing the offending neighbor. And other people said we're recommending that you use larger mirrors. And I'll tell you more about this in a bit. Fourth was hanging bells on the fence that separates your home from your neighbors. Don't do this. Now, this is actually based on good Feng Shui principles, but it doesn't work well. And I'll let you know why during this presentation. The worst part of advice by far was using symbols of war or weapons. Especially don't do this. And so let's look at the first one, right? They say that you should place a basin of water between your home and the home of your neighbor. They don't even say a water feature. They don't even say a water fountain. They just say a basin of water. You know what that's going to create? That's going to be stagnant water. And what stagnant water produces or creates is that it's going to be foul smelling, right? It's going to get bad pretty soon. And also that you are going to have a mosquito breeding thing in your yard. And so whatever they're saying, they're saying that water has calming energies. This is not a correct feng shui. Actually, water is related in the positive to responsibility, and in the negative, it is related to fear. Stagnant water would increase fear. So if your neighbor is coming from a place of fear, and because they're afraid of whatever they're afraid in their life, they're creating problems for you, they're going to get worse. And so, like I had chosen this photo because it shows you things are going to fall in the water is going to get dirty, and it's going to become a mosquito breeding station. Imagine, with the horror that people have of all the illnesses that could be transmitted by a mosquito. Imagine putting that in between your house and the house of your neighbor. And thinking, believing that's going to improve things. It's not going to improve things, so don't do it. Another piece of advice, they say paint your home white because the color white is the energy of protection. That is bad feng shui. Because the color white in feng shui does not represent heaven, as some people might tell you that is the color of heaven. Actually, the color white is the color of one aspect of our human relationship with heaven. But the color that represents protection from heaven in feng shui is the color red. And that is the reason that in feng shui we recommend that if you can, you paint your front door red, and doesn't have to be a bright Chinese red. It can be any color, like a terracotta or burgundy, a crimson red, any color that has red. But if you do not like or can't paint your door in red, certainly you wouldn't want all the world to have their door painted red, especially if they don't like that color. But placing pots on the sides of your door that are in red, or pots in any color that have red plants in them, can be very helpful. Or just placing any ornament next to your main door that has red in it symbolizes bringing in the protection from heaven. But it's definitely not the color white. Plus, if your feng shui consultant tells you that you need to do something as drastic as painting your whole home, that is not a good feng shui consultant. Feng shui is characterized by doing very little, by recommending very little changes that are going to produce great results. So do not paint your home white thinking that's going to create a protection for you. Now, Bagua mirrors, right? So there's many different designs of Bagua mirrors. Bagua mirror is basically a mirror that on the outside is usually in the shape of an octagon or the shape of a circle. And on the outside, it has the trigrams that come from the I Ching. And it has the 3 solid lines at the top and the 3 split lines at the bottom. And this is what is called as the former heaven sequence. And in the center, it has a mirror. That mirror can be flat, it can be convex, it can be concave. And it has been recommended for many, many years as a cure to disperse and deflect bad energies coming towards your home. And so back in the day when I first started practicing feng shui, I did recommend that people put a Bagua mirror on top, especially if their home is at the end of a T intersection. And it looks, the cars are coming like right towards the house, and then they turn left or right at the last moment, because then you're having the headlights of cars constantly pointed at the house, and that's very bad. And that is probably still the only circumstance where I might tell a person to put a Bagua mirror. But if I can avoid a Bagua mirror, I'll avoid it at all costs. Because the concept itself of returning bad energy to its source is evil in principle. And so if somebody attacks you, right, and you say like, oh, I'm just going to return the energy to them so that they can feel what it is like, it's not a good idea. It's a really, really bad idea indeed. And so because you're going to create bad karma for yourself, and you're going to create animosity on the neighbor. Now, feng shui is becoming more and more popular, and more people are familiar with what it means to have a Bagua mirror. So imagine that for whatever reason, you decide you're going to put a Bagua mirror above your main entrance to protect your home from whatever, from bad neighbors, from cars coming towards it, from whatever danger you perceive in the environment. if any of your neighbors across the street know what a Bagua mirror is, they're going to say, oh, they're sending bad energy to me. And they're going to become your instant enemies. So it is not a good idea, because more people know about it and they can have a bad reaction to you putting up a Bagua mirror, but also because it is not good for you to wish evil on another person. So do not use a Bagua mirror. Now, I've seen other advice, that people were recommending that you actually place a bigger mirror on the window facing the bad neighbor. That is completely absurd, because if you, and some people even put the mirror on the outside of the house facing the bad neighbor. And so when you look at your own house, you're going to see the home of the bad neighbor reflected into your house and visually coming inside of your house. That's not a good idea. Then you're making yourself more vulnerable. And actually, energetically and symbolically, what you do if you place any large mirror outside the house, on the walls of your house or on the window of your house, you are basically making a symbolic big gaping hole in your home, and you're going to deplete your home of energy. Again, if you have any questions, make sure to put them in the chat. Now, if you are watching the replay of this video, then you can put any questions in the comments at the bottom of the page or the reply section. Other advice, people are saying that you can take 3 bells, tie them with red string, and hang them on your side of the fence that divides your property from the property of your neighbor. This is actually solid Feng Shui advice, except for one problem. Bells make noises, and placing such a visible cure like this on the fence, where your neighbor can probably see it. Now, if you had a privacy fence, the neighbor would not be able to see it, but they would be able to hear the bells, right? And so the thing is, when you have a neighbor that's very antagonistic towards you, anything that can call their attention is not a good idea, is not a good Feng Shui cure. Because, what if the neighbor starts complaining about the sound the bells are making when there is a lot of wind? And this also applies to wind chimes. Some people are recommending to place wind chimes near your door. That is good Feng Shui advice. Now, if you want to use wind chimes near your door, it's better to use wind chimes where the sticks in the wind chime are actually long and they're actually pipes, so they're hollow on the inside. And that can be a good addition to any home. But there's a lot of homes, like especially in condos and apartments, there's prohibitions against using wind chimes. And in some cases, if your wind chime is very loud, your neighbor may complain about the noise from the wind chime. So you have to be careful with that. And the worst type of advice that you can find out there on how to deal with a bad neighbor is use symbols of war in order to protect yourself, quote unquote, protect yourself from bad neighbors. And so it is not a good idea. Now, I'm not going to tell you what you would use, because I don't want to share in any way advice that would be so dangerous as this. So there are certain things that are implements of war or symbols of war that you can use in the home to defend yourself or protect yourself or send back energy to bad neighbors. But I'm not even going to share with you what they are or how you would use them, because that's kind of like black magic, and that's something I never want to get into. So I'm not going to share that with you. And so much of the advice that is being given out there to deal with bad neighbors is either plain nonsense and not based on true Feng Shui knowledge, or would create bad karma for you. Some of it might even backfire and can cause problems for you and your loved ones. And I'm just remembering a story about a woman who had she had taken a course on Feng Shui, and in her course, they taught her that she should put a Bagua mirror above her entrance, because she had a very long driveway leading from the curb, from the street to her own home. And so she did this, right? And I had some clients one time that had asked me if they could do that. And yes, they had a very long driveway. Their driveway was about 1/4 of a mile long. And the driveway did point, did end up in a carport that pointed directly at their main door. And so they wanted so bad to put up that Bagua mirror, but I told them, please don't do that. And they were said, like, why? And I said, because you're going to be deflecting and returning negative energy to yourselves every day when you come home, and to your guests when your guests come to visit, because you all are going to have to use that driveway, right? And so thank goodness they listened to me. But I read about this story of this woman who had taken this Feng Shui course, and she had this condition in her home, and she put the Bagua mirror above her door, and then her husband and her were mauled by a dog on their own driveway. They ended up having to call 911. It was a terrible situation. Please, please, please do not use Bagua mirrors. Do not use any mirrors on the outside of the home. So let me know if you have any questions. And I'm going to stop my share for a little bit there, so that that we can chat a little. If you have any questions, put them in the chat if you are taking this class live. And remember, if you are listening to the replay or watching the replay, you can post questions at the bottom. And so if you have had, put it in the chat if you have had a bad neighbor in the past, and put it in the chat if you have a bad neighbor right now. So there's a question in the chat. I have a small decoration on the outside of home with a little mirror on it. Is that okay? I have to look at it. You know, I don't know for sure, but in general, it's a bad idea to have mirrors on the outside. And one of the reasons for that is that mirrors are fragile, and so they're easy to break. And in some cases, the mirror might be so little that it might not matter. But that's something that I probably would have to see. And so when I work with my clients, when they have had problems with bad neighbors, the first thing that I need to work on with my clients is the desire to hurt back. Because it is very tempting. If a neighbor has been very mean to you, if a neighbor has been very evil to you, it is natural. It's only natural for you to want them to experience the same thing that you have experienced. You know, they call the police on you, so you call the police on them. They do this to you, so you do that to them. You know, like an eye for an eye. And that is not a good attitude. And so any Feng Shui cure, if you go to any place, and a Feng Shui consultant or somebody who calls themselves a Feng Shui expert is telling you that you should do something that's going to send back the energy to your neighbor, that is not a good Feng Shui consultant. That is not a person you should follow, because that kind of attitude is going to create bad karma for you. Okay? Now, some advice that I have found when I was doing all this research for you on what people are recommending that you do to deal with bad neighbors, some of it made sense. For example, somebody said, if you just make your main door, just make your entrance very, very beautiful, fill it up with color, with plants, you know, so it's a gift to the neighborhood. Yes, that's good advice. That's no secret, right? Somebody else had said you need to have good fences. Yes, you know, that's a good idea. If you have issues with neighbors, it's probably a good idea to have a good fence. Somebody else said, well, add some plants between you and your neighbor. That's actually a good idea. But these are things that don't have a great insight, and that are going to help you ameliorate a situation with a bad neighbor, but are not necessarily going to put you in an energetic space where you can solve your problems with your neighbors. So somebody said, thank you. What if you don't want to send energy back but would like to stop receiving negative energy? That's a really good question. And so I have designed a cure that is called the Sun Bagua, which is the cure that was designed. It's a vibrational medicine cure that Bill Austin, a healer in Florida, and I designed together to bless the home and protect the home without returning bad energy to the home, and so to the neighbors or to whoever you feel is attacking you. And so I will share with you all that link to that product and the link to that article, and later on today when I send the link to the replay. And if you're watching the replay, the link to that article is going to be underneath. And so, yeah, you know, you definitely want to stop negative energy that is being sent to you, but you want to do it in the way that the sun would do it. And so like you could send anything to the sun. You can send a meteorite, an asteroid, a nuclear bomb, whatever you send to the sun, you know, would get consumed by the fire of the sun. Before it ever got to the sun, it would never hurt it. So you need to get yourself in a place where you can be like that. And you need to put your home in a place where your home is like that, where even if somebody's sending bad energy towards your home or towards you, that bad energy is going to consumed by the fire of your love and your good vibrations long before it ever comes near you. So that's what I want to teach you to do. And so what I recommend is using energetic cures. And these some of the aspects of these energetic cures are physical, some of them are purely energetic, and some of them are spiritual or metaphysical. And the cures that I'm going to teach you when I do the teleclass the last Thursday in November, the cures that I'm going to teach you are cures that have worked. They're proved. You know, they're not things that I'm coming up with and like, oh, let's test this, see if it works. There are cures that I have worked, that I have used, that have worked for my clients with amazing results. Many times, you know, things that they didn't think could be results. So there's another comment. I live in rental apartment, and most negative energy is coming from landlord who installed a video camera right above the entrance of my apartment. I cannot change color of the front door or within apartment. What can I do to protect myself? He also does not do repairs, and in the entrance of the apartment, I have a hole with wires sticking out. In addition to other neglected repairs, how can I protect myself? I feel most tired and losing my energy. That would be very draining, you know. First of all, there may be some legal recourse for you because you signed a lease and there's certain commitments the landlord needs to abide by, right? But the thing is, whenever you think about protecting yourself, there's an element of fear there. So I have to protect myself because I'm afraid somebody else is going to hurt me, right? That's the thinking, that's the rationale. And so what you need to start working on for yourself and for your home is to get yourself into a vibration where you cannot get hurt. And I know that may sound really out there, or it may sound impossible, but that is the only way to feel safe. You don't become safe by sending a word against every single thing you're afraid of. You become safe by working within yourself and within your home, so that the energy of your home and the energy of your life is so good that there is no room for negativity to come in and ruin things for you. But there are things that you can do, and this is why, you know, I'm so excited about the upcoming teleclass, because I'm going to be sharing with you cures that are invisible and that you can do even if you are renting, even if the covenants of your condo or your subdivision are really strict and would not allow you to do things that were more visible. And they're going to protect you, yes, but at the same time, they're going to strengthen you in a way that you're no longer going to be afraid. And they're going to help you raise your vibration so that your home has better luck, so that your life has better luck, and that eventually, and for example, in a situation if you are renting and you have a bad landlord, where eventually you are going to be led to a better home, to a better situation, or if you have a really bad neighbor, somebody who might be even dangerous, right? That person would just move away. And so let me go back to sharing my presentation. There it is. Okay. And so the kinds of cures that I teach my clients to use are love and above cures. So we used to say only love, you know, work with only love, but there are vibrations that are higher than love. So you want to use only love and above cures, because when you place these cures, you want to make sure that you create dharma, which is like good points in spiritual heaven bank account, instead of creating bad karma for you. So karma is the law of cause and effect. And so when you send out bad energy to somebody, you are creating bad karma for yourself. It's like kind of like a boomerang, right? And if somebody sends you bad energy and you just deflect it and return it to them, it's going to create bad karma for you too. Because instead of dissolving the negativity, you are reproducing it. And so you don't want to do any of that. You need to use cures that won't trigger the neighbor. And so, for example, some of the cures that I have seen in websites where they're recommending what to do Feng Shui wise if you have bad neighbors, some of those cures were so overt, were so visible, that the neighbor's going to notice you're doing something, and they're going to get nervous, and they're going to start attacking you more. For example, and this is the case, you know, one of my clients has been recommended to put, I think it was 7 bagua mirrors facing towards the neighbor. You know, like if your neighbor comes out and looks at the side of your house one day and sees 7 mirrors on there, they're going to get an inkling that's about them, and they're going to start getting nervous about it, right? And so you want to do things that don't trigger the neighbor. You don't want to do things that don't trigger the landlord if the problem is with the landlord. And so you want to do things that are kind of hidden. You want to use cures that bless the neighbor. And I know it is really hard when you have a really bad neighbor. You know, some, after I did my live videos when I was sharing of our problems with our bad neighbors that we have had in the past, and I asked folks to share their stories with bad neighbors with me. Some of them were just horrendous. You know, there was some people are having things thrown over the fence, nasty things, black magic thrown over the fence into their yards. And it's really hard when you're facing something like that to say, hey, I'm going to bless my neighbor, right? Because the natural instinct, you know, but that's the animal side of us. And in Feng Shui, we call the tiger side of us. The tiger side of us wants us to lash back. But if we lash back, we're only increasing the bad. So we want to make cures that bless the neighbor, even and especially when the neighbor doesn't deserve it. Because the neighbor's highest good, wishing for the neighbor's highest good, is also your highest good. You also want to use cures that create community. Now, and I grant you, in some cases, you're not going to be able to create community with a really bad neighbor. You know, there's some neighbors that they're just not going to change. You may have some neighbors that are addicted to substances. You may have neighbors that are doing things to themselves, you know, that may be smoking, drinking. Your neighbors may have mental problems. And so because of all these, you can't always create community with the neighbor that is causing the problem. But the Feng Shui cures that I'm going to teach you to do in the teleclass are going to show you how to create community in the neighborhood, because you are going to be stronger if you are friends with more people in your neighborhood. The more friends you have on your street, the more friends you have on your neighborhood, the least exposed and vulnerable you're going to be to that one neighbor that doesn't like you. So I hope that makes sense. And so you need to use cures that create community. And you need to use cures that have energetic power. So my cures are designed using sea salt, using quartz crystals. We may use other types of crystals sometimes, but most of the time we use quartz crystals in several sizes. You know, in some commercial property, we may use really large quartz crystals. For a home, most of the time, the quartz crystals are going to be between 1 inch tall and 3 inches tall. But we use different sizes of quartz crystals and different numbers of quartz crystals and different patterns of quartz crystals. And then to add more power to the cures, sometimes, not always, sometimes we use essential oils to give more power to those cures. And the results that I'm getting from my clients, that I have been getting for the last 20 years, working with clients, are amazing. So I'm going to share with you some testimonials. Now, these testimonials, you know, they're anonymous. I'm only allowed to use their initials, because some of them are about sensitive cases, and other people, they don't want their names advertised or publicized, having to do with energetic things, with metaphysical things, and things like that. And so I respect that. But these are all case histories of clients of mine. And so this is a developer, a builder and developer. And so I'm going to read to you her testimonial. We were having problems with a neighbor regarding the property limits for some land by the beach that we had purchased for a hotel development. The children of the previous owner, the grown children, right, who had passed, still own land next to the property we bought. And they were claiming that we were building on their land. They sued us. And this lawsuit, when they contacted me, this lawsuit had been going on for over a year. After I planted the crystals in the number and pattern you showed me, a document emerged that the other side's lawyers had been trying to hide from disclosure. This document proved that we were in the right. Thank you. Who would have known such a simple Feng Shui cure could produce such amazing results? This has saved us tens of thousands of dollars in legal fees and from the delay in construction. And so that is one testimonial of using a combination of crystals. And she didn't mention it here, but I always work with the belief system of the person, of the client. So in this case, the family was Catholic. So I created a cure for them that had that included a ritual that was according to their faith to strengthen and empower their cure. Then this is another story. This is from a Unity church in the Midwest, and this is the testimonial they gave me. Our small church was being railroaded by the mega church next door to sell them our land and building. They had already ordered the architect to draw plans for their new building, which would be partly on what was our land. So this small church had not agreed to sell their land, and the mega church had already ordered the floor plans drawn that would be on their property. They were so pushy, they were making some of our members buckle. This deal would mean that we would have to move to a more expensive building and assume financial responsibilities that would be a huge burden for our small church. After the board planted the crystals with the sea salt cure you recommended, the megachurch stopped their assault and ordered their architect to redraw the plans to go around our property. So no, this was amazing because the board of the Unity Church that hired me, they were expecting there will still have to be some negotiation and some uncomfortable exchanges with the mega church. But no, as soon as they did the cure that I recommended for them, they stopped pushing. They just stopped even trying. And this little church in the Midwest is still doing great. Another testimonial. The neighbor behind me was very aggressive toward us and was getting worse every week. I had used the Bagua mirror cure for my home, but it made things worse. This client actually confirmed that after she put up the Bagua mirror, things escalated. You advised me to use the 9-crystal virtual energetic wall for my back property limit and to enhance it with salt water and lavender essential oils. Now my neighbor has stopped bothering me, and if we cross each other on the street, she ignores me and pretends I don't exist, which is fine by me. So this is a homemaker. So this is the interesting thing, sometimes a neighbor might just be so bad that the best hope is for them to act like you don't exist. And that is a huge win for a person who has been tormenting you to start ignoring you. That is a big improvement. And another thing I want to share with you guys is when I have worked with clients and students, helping them deal with bad neighbors, there's usually an immediate relief in the situation. But sometimes they can go, they apply the cures for 6 months, for a month, for 2 years, things go really well. And then at some point, there may be an incident with the neighbor again. But what my students and clients find is that if that happens, they are much more able to confront the situation, to respond in ways that are legal, that are ethical, and that solve the problem. So sometimes an attack by a neighbor is an opportunity to assert yourself, and that's a good thing, right? And so whatever a neighbor has done, and there's all sorts of different degrees of problems with neighbors, and things can get violent. So it's not something that you can just discount or dismiss. You can just say, okay, I'm going to ignore this, right? And especially for people who are really mean, and they may be getting a kick out of their reaction. Sometimes when you say, okay, this person did that, but I'm going to ignore them, that just kicks in their desire to escalate, to see how much they need to do in order to get a reaction from you. And so you don't want that. You don't want to allow that. You definitely need to take actions to stop your neighbors from trying to hurt you. And so what we use, in my cures, my metaphysical cures, we use quartz crystals, kind of like this one. This is the more common size that we use. We also use patterns of crystals or crystal grids. And for those, we use smaller quartz crystals, like sets of 1-inch quartz crystals, which are really cute. I'll teach you how to prepare them, how to clear them, how to enhance their power. We also use sea salt. So some people say, well, why can I use Himalayan salt? And you can use any salt, but sea salt works better. And this is because sea salt it comes from the ocean, and the ocean is a representation of the water element. And so in working with sea salt, you are transmuting your fears into responsibility, which responsibility, not courage, is the upside of fear in Feng Shui. And so you have to be responsible in dealing with your neighbors. You have to be responsible. And so sometimes there's things that you need to do. For example, I had shared with you that one of the things that we had to do to deal with our bad neighbors is we had to get a survey, because these were the kind of neighbors that would have gotten a kick out of having to argue with us back and forth about what the right property limit was. And so in our case, sometimes you have to take actions of that kind. We say, okay, there's this professional here. The professional has said, this is where the border is. This is where the limit is. And sometimes, like one of my students recently, she had to call the police. And or threaten to call the police, because people who are bullies, they're usually also very afraid. And so sometimes you do these things. But what happens is that when you have Feng Shui, when you have good Feng Shui, you are going to strengthen yourself and you are going to know what to do. And so that's one of the things that I have seen is this blooming of the soul of my clients and students as they work with their crystals, as they make their grids, as they create energetic protections for their homes. They flower, they bloom as individuals. They become more authentically themselves, and they become more able to confront situations in life. So let me know if you have any questions. And the next thing I want to do is I want to share with you my program that I'm going to be teaching. So this program is going to be a teleclass. It's going to be taught live on Thursday, November the 29th, which is the last Thursday in November. Now this year, a lot of times Thanksgiving celebration is on the last Thursday of the month, but in this case, it's on the third week. And so the class is going to take place the week after Thanksgiving, when hopefully you have come back from visiting your relatives, or your relatives have already gone back home. And so I'm going to show you the program that I'm going to have. And I'm really excited to be sharing this, because this information I'm going to share before. There are things that I have only ever shared with my students that are enrolled to become Feng Shui consultants, or with people that are doing the Feng Shui immersion program, which is my extended Feng Shui consultation. So there's another question. Is it bad Feng Shui to throw a mirror in the garage? In the garbage. I read garage, but it's in the garbage. It is not bad Feng Shui to throw a mirror in the garbage. And one thing in our Western culture, we have this idea that if you break a mirror, that's bad luck. So in Feng Shui, breaking a mirror is not bad luck. Keeping a broken mirror is bad luck. So just because you broke a mirror, that's not bad luck. But if you keep a broken mirror, that's bad luck. So mirrors that break, you have to get rid of right away. That's one rule. And so let me see here if I can share my screen. Yeah, there you go. So this is the teleclass that I'm going to be teaching, Feng Shui Cures to Deal with Bad Neighbors, how to use crystals, rocks, and essential oils. And that should, in rocks, you should include salt, sea salt, to improve relationships with neighbors. And so you're going to learn how to use sea salt, crystals, rocks, and essential oils to create metaphysical Feng Shui cures to protect yourself from bad neighbors, create a harmonious environment in and around your home, and improve your own luck, which is much, much better than just this idea of deflecting, sending back bad energy to the neighbors. And so when does the teleclass start and finish? The teleclass will happen live on Thursday, November the 29th, from 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern Time, which is New York time for those of you who don't live in the United States. If you can't make the live class, don't worry. The teleclass will be recorded and then posted on this training website for you to learn from and enjoy. How long do you have to access the teleclass once the recording is posted? It is lifetime access. After enrolling, you have unlimited access to this teleclass for as long as you like, across any and all devices you own. So you can watch this on your computer, your smartphone, your tablet. there's the testimonials again. And I want you to pay attention to this, because I do have a super early bird pricing, and then I have an early bird pricing. So if you enroll by Tuesday, November the 27th, you get to enroll on this amazing class where I'm going to share secrets that I have only shared before with my closest students and my closest clients for just $12. Now, if you don't enroll by Tuesday, then the price goes up to $24. And if you do not enroll before the teleclass happens, then on November 30th and from then on, the class is going to be $36. Now, $36 to solve a terrible problem with a neighbor is not a huge investment. It's a very little investment in exchange for what you're going to get. But if you enroll by Tuesday, November the 27th, you get to get it for just $12, which is an amazing deal. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this in the chat if you are taking this live, or it's going to be under the video if you're watching the replay. And so, oh, and I said, you remember I promised earlier that if we have time, I was going to share with you some stories of clients of mine who had moved on this idea that they could move to a place where they would not have any neighbors at all. And so we do have a little time, so I want to share that with you. So I had some clients that they wanted no neighbors, right? So they bought a farm. They had no intention of farming. They chose this farm because it was far from town. It was about an hour to get to the downtown of the city. And it was surrounded by farms across on the sides, all over, surrounded by farms. And the farmhouse happened to be located near the middle of the property, so that they would not ever have any opportunity to see or meet their neighbors. And so they moved in there. They were very happy. They were there for about 6 months. And the couple next door, who were a very nice couple, they had farmed all their lives, they were ready to retire, they sold their house. And who do you think they sold to? They sold it to a quarry. And so from then on, they had to live with the constant explosions of a quarry. And that's what brought them to a class that I was teaching on visualizing your dream home. And they told me, you know, they thought the solution was no neighbors, but when they saw the solution, they ended up with the worst possible neighbor, a quarry. And so one of the things that I teach my students and clients, if they're looking for a place they want to move into, is to how to recognize potentially bad neighbors. And so that's the one story. Then there's another story of this gal. You know, she always dreamed of living in the mountains, surrounded by nothing but nature, right? She wanted to be away from electrical posts, away from cell phone towers, away from any kind of electromagnetic frequencies, just away from everything. And so her husband said, okay, that's your dream, that's what I'm going to give you. So they built a log cabin in the mountains, gorgeous. I mean, it's like a luxury chalet. And then one time, her husband had a medical emergency, and it was the early fall. So she called 911 from the landline because she couldn't get cell reception. And I don't even know how she got a landline because they were in the boondocks, but they had a landline. And it took 25 minutes for the first responders to get to her house. It ended up that he was having something like a panic attack or some digestive issues that had some of the same symptoms as a heart attack. But then she realized, if this had been a heart attack, my husband would have died because the responders would not have been able to get in time to save him. And so then she decided it was a really bad idea, especially as they age, right? It was a really bad idea to live in the boondocks. And so when she hired me, she wanted me to help her choose the best location for a property she had bought in a subdivision, you know, in a big lot, so that she didn't have to hear the neighbors, but close enough that responders could come to her, close enough that she could make friends with the neighbors, close enough that if she ever needed the neighbors, if the neighbors ever needed her, they would be able to help each other. And so, and there's other stories. Now, there's other stories from other clients that thought that no neighbors was the solution. No neighbors is not the solution. What you need to do is you need to learn how to strengthen the energy of your own home so that the luck of your home improves, so that your personal luck improves, so that the luck of every single person that lives with you improves. And so that's what I want to share with you today. What I hope that you will take advantage of this opportunity to enroll for this teleclass. As I say, I'm really excited to share this because this is information I never shared before, except on a one-on-one basis with students and clients. And so it's Feng Shui Cures to Deal with Bad Neighbors. I put the link in the chat. If you're watching this live, you're going to see the link underneath this video if you're watching the replay. So Feng Shui Cures to Deal with Bad Neighbors, how to use crystals, rocks, and essential oils to improve relationships with neighbors. In rocks includes sea salt, because it's kind of a rock or a crystal, right? And so I hope you have enjoyed this free class, and that it encourages you to take action, to learn how to protect your home energetically, to learn how to strengthen your home energetically, to learn how to strengthen yourself. So no matter what your neighbors are up to, it's not going to affect you. And so let me know if you still have, if you have any questions, put them in the chat. And, or you can send me the questions later via email. Put them in my Facebook page or the Facebook group. And I'll be happy to help you with anything I can help you right now. But I do hope that you give yourself this gift. Only $12. You know, what are you going to do with $12? That could be better than learning how to create energetic protection for your home. And with that, I'm going to say goodbye, and I'm looking forward to seeing you on the live teleclass November the 29th from noon to 1 p.m. But if you can't make it live, don't worry about it, because you can make it to the live presentation, right? Because there's going to be a replay, and that replay is not going to expire. You can go to it anytime you need. Another message: I have your books and really like how you approach Feng Shui. Will this course be applicable to renters? Yes, we're going to have, that's one reason why I had asked people to send me their stories, their scary stories with Feng Shui, with neighbors, you know, so that I can prepare this class to address everything. So we're going to have some cures for people who live in the suburban situation where you have the house in the middle of a lot and they're surrounded by a yard. We're going to have solutions for people who live in multi-story apartments where they have neighbors underneath, above, on the sides, sometimes all around. And also for people who live in condos where they actually share a garage wall or a living wall with their neighbors. So there's going to be cures that are going to be appropriate for every type of home. And if there's anything I miss, you know, if you live in a type of home that I miss, I'll create a cure for your situation. And so thank you so much for sharing this almost hour with me. And I hope to see you on the teleclass. And I hope that you continue learning Feng Shui from a source that you can rely, because I have spent 20 years, over 20 years, researching and testing Feng Shui. And the information that I provide to you is reliable. I share with you only things that work. And my mission is to help you turn your current home into your dream home. Even if you're a renter, help you to turn that home into a dream home. Because when you turn your current home into a dream home, it becomes more probable, it becomes more possible that you could move into a home of your own, or a nicer home, the home that you have visualized as the home of your dreams. And I do that, you know, with 20 years of studying and researching Feng Shui, but also because I studied architecture before I got into Feng Shui, and I graduated as an architect in my country, which is Ecuador. And so I have all this information, and I have blended the two things together to give you things that work, that look good, and that are going to help you live a happier life so you can realize your full potential. Thank you so much for coming.